So good afternoon, everyone, and some familiar faces. Welcome back to those of you who came last time. Apologise for being a few minutes late. I had a lot of guests today. I've been teaching since early this morning, so quite a lot on. So, what's the program? Okay. I guess I'll say a few words, give a talk first, and then what? Then we'll have a period of meditation, and then have a short break, and then come back for question and answer session, and then to finish off another short meditation, sit maybe for say about 30 minutes. If anyone's not comfortable sitting on the floor, then do feel free to sit on chairs. If all the chairs are used up at the back, there are more downstairs if anybody wants a chair. I think if some of you have heard before, when we first arrived in Ubon, when Ajahn Jayasaro, our teacher, was still alive and vigorous. I myself arrived in 1978, at which time he was still able to teach, and he made a point that when in the case we give public talks, that we shouldn't ever prepare anything and just talk off the cuff, which is rather difficult when you're a monk and you don't have cuffs, but it's particularly difficult in that we're talking in Thai usually, so you have challenges of the language as well. Good training anyway, I think, although you'll notice if you listen to monks in our tradition giving talks that the first sort of 10 and 15 minutes they sort of wander around a bit before they get into a groove, so you have to be a little bit patient. And so anyway, that's enough of a preamble, and I think one of the distinguishing features of the Buddha Dhamma is that it's not a belief system, and there are not dogmas that one is required to believe in, and belief is not given the central position it is in most religious systems. In fact, it's treated with some degree of wariness, and we're constantly reminded that faith is a spiritual quality which must always be balanced and governed by the intelligence, critical faculty, the wisdom faculty, to prevent it drifting into superstition or fanaticism. So faith in Buddhist view is a kind of a step on the path. And there is a famous episode in which the Buddha was sitting in a cave flanked by his two chief disciples, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, and a Brahmin priest came to visit, and the Buddha said, this is Venerable Sariputta and this is Venerable Moggallana. They are completely faithless. And of course the Brahmin was rather confused, considering that of course the senior disciples, the left and right hand man, would surely be the people with the most perfect faith, and the Buddha says on the contrary, they're completely without faith. The idea being that faith is a quality that is needed as long as you haven't had any direct experience of something. Now you may have a lot of beliefs about let's say England, if you've never been to England, for instance, you have a lot of information from books, from personal testimonies, from movies, from whatever, but it's still on the level of faith. But if you go to England, then there you no longer need to have faith about or belief in those books and various articles that you've read. Similarly, the Buddhist practice is one of seeing for oneself, testing things out, realization, and the intellectual knowledge that one amasses must be focused, must lead on to practice and verification. If it's simply amassing knowledge for knowledge's sake, then that's considered a bit of a waste of time, because we don't know how long we're going to be around. Life is very uncertain, and for that reason we have to make choices about how we're going to spend our time and this kind of things that we're going to study and take an interest in. So in the Pali language we have these three key words for the Dhamma, or the teachings of the Buddha: pariyatti, patipatti and pativeta. And pariyatti means that knowledge, that intellectual knowledge, which is conducive to, leads on to practice, and the practice is which is correct according to Buddhist ideas, is that which leads to liberation, leads to letting go. Liberation is the term by which the Buddha characterized the whole of his teachings. He said, just as the taste of the waters of the ocean is everywhere the same, no matter where you might test the waters, it always has the same salty taste. By the shores, in the middle of the ocean, in shallow waters, deep waters, it's always the same taste. And the taste of the Buddha's teachings is the taste of liberation. So in practical terms, that gives us an orientation for our spiritual life. So why do we emphasize giving and charity so much? Because it produces a liberation from selfish attachment to one's wealth and one's possessions, all those things that conventionally we call mine. We keep precepts because that liberates us from bad karma produced through body and speech, and liberates us from guilt and shame and various debilitating mental states. We practice samadhi, develop wholesome dhammas in order to liberate ourselves from negative emotions. We develop wisdom in order to liberate ourselves from craving and from ignorance. So the path is always a path towards liberation, and this is a very useful reflection right from the very beginning of our study. For instance, the Buddha said that if you were to keep precepts scrupulously or purely, and on account of one's ethical, moral purity, you were to consider yourself superior to someone who doesn't keep precepts, who's unethical, immoral, then on that grounds your morality would become sullied, because the morality is not fulfilling its job of liberating you. You're creating new knots for yourself, identifying yourself as a moral person and feeling superior to someone who you consider immoral. So it's even on the level of keeping precepts. It's not a sort of a matter of blindly following cut and dried rules. There's a lot of sensitivity to time and place, and a lot of patience and mindfulness and inner equanimity, for instance, that are required, and being able to keep a track on the movements of the mind and the way that we can be insincere towards ourselves and to lie to ourselves, deceive ourselves. And this is something that with the presence of mindfulness we become more and more able to see what is arising and passing away in the mind as phenomena rather than as who we are. So that so if we start off from a basic principle of the Dhamma, that identification with the various aspects of the body and mind causes us to suffer, and non-identification with them reduces or eliminates suffering. Then I think we have a good example of a teaching which can perhaps at first glance seem somewhat philosophical, but then on second glance you see that it's immensely practical and something which you can almost immediately put to the test. Does this seem reasonable to you? The Dhamma of the Lord Buddha is called ehipassiko, which means come and see, which means it challenges you to test it out, and doubt, criticism is not considered to be wrong or blameworthy at all. You're encouraged to question any parts of the Dhamma that don't seem right to you, don't correspond to your experience, and that is a sign of intelligence and wisdom rather than a sign that you're a bad person because you won't believe it all. So it's something that really has to be tested out in the crucible of your own experience. This is very pragmatic teaching. So what we're looking at is we're looking at our life, looking at our body and mind, and in fact the body and mind are one and the same thing with the world. And we think the world outside us, and there's this kind of little me somewhere inside us who's experiencing, who's acting, and we're asking whether that is an accurate representation of the way things really are. We have so many assumptions that we have absorbed from our culture, from our parents, from our schooling, about who we are, that we have never put to the test. We've never really examined with any great profundity. And now we've made the decision to really sort of look and see whether things are the way they thought they are. Now this kind of inner exploration demands there's a number of preconditions for it to be successful. One is that the mind has to be sufficiently resilient, sharp, clear, and equanimous in order to look within in any concerted fashion. Usually the mind is flitting around and flickering around at such a rapid rapid rate that the capacity of the mind to look clearly within is severely limited. So our first task is to train the mind to have sufficient strength, integrity, clarity, to be able to look at the way things are. And the main engine of this development of mind is what we call mindfulness, or clear comprehension. And this can be explained in a number of ways, but I think most telling or important feature is that ability to be present to our experience. And when we take that on as a challenge, the first thing we start to observe is how little we are truly present to our experience, how much of our life is spent in a kind of a daze or semi-hypnotic trance. I always remember reading a paper on the subject of hypnosis, which I've always been quite interested in. And whenever you read about this or even see it in documentaries, it always seems to me people are hypnotized so easily. You know, I think you tend to think, surely it can't be as easy as that. I mean, with a watch or a few calming words and a person goes into a trance, it seems a bit phony. But the psychologist who's done a lot of work with hypnosis says the reason why it's so easy is that the normal mental state of your average person is about that far apart from the hypnotic state. So it's just a matter of just sort of tipping it over the edge. Yeah, I can see that. So when you start to look at your mind, okay, like you have perhaps in your day certain, you kind of have categories of things which are like really important, and then sort of everyday kind of stuff you have to get through, and really sort of boring stuff, and sort of nothing, sort of grey, sludgy stuff, you know, just sort of goes by hardly without you realizing. And so things which are exciting, interesting, new, things which produce strong emotion, either positive or negative, we give a lot. It's not difficult to attend to that and to be present to it, because you don't have to put much effort. Just the intensity of the impact and the feelings, the physiological feelings that take place, you're almost compelled to be present. But the vast majority of our experience is not that way. You have to put effort into it to really be there. And if you don't put effort, your mind is going off to last weekend, next weekend, pleasant experiences that you are anticipating in the future, or perhaps you're someone who likes to worry endlessly about something which hasn't happened yet, and or you're someone who, whenever you get a little bit bored, not go over some really pleasant experience in the past, or else your mind is just going round and round and round about something that you did or somebody else did or said. And so this kind of immediate kind of emotional hit we get from pleasant, unpleasant memories, pleasant, unpleasant anticipation is kind of a drug, and it's just so easy. You can turn it on as easy as your iPod, and just when you're in a car or when you're just nothing which is really demanding your attention, you just kind of drift. And that means that you're, in Buddhist point of view, you're half dead. And that's been putting it politely. Actually, the Buddha said you are dead. It's like being dead. So the question is, can you wake up? Do you want to wake up? Are you interested in being a bit more alive in your life? So maybe you say, well, I don't know whether I really want to be alive with that kind of thing going on. But I would propose that it's a good way to go, because it's amazing that you can experience the most pleasant and happy moments doing the most mundane of tasks, if you have this magic quality of mindfulness, that full willingness, interest in being awake in the present moment. Now, there is a sort of proviso here, or something that I should add, that it's possible to be present in the present in quite an unwholesome way. If someone is under the influence of a drug or alcohol, then they can be quite, in the present moment. They're not in the past or in the future, but in a very kind of dull and distorted way. But it's not this kind of animal sort of exuberance in the present moment. In fact, there's a good argument to say that the reason why human beings evolved beyond the other creatures in this world is because of their ability to remember the past and plan for the future. So it's not that we're advocating this kind of mindless, thoughtless dwelling in the present moment. It wouldn't be possible to do it anyway. But merely the abandonment of all the unnecessary, useless drifting off into the past and future, merely out of a kind of a reluctance or laziness to put forth effort to be present. And so making that effort, one finds that for instance, just sweeping the house, or in a monk's case, sweeping leaves on a forest floor, polishing the sala and polishing the Buddha image, or whatever. Very simple manual work, which is generally denigrated in modern culture, isn't it? That kind of work can give you a great deal of satisfaction. Just being with the movements of the physical body, being present to what's going on. If there are things that need to be remembered and borne in mind, then you bear them in mind. If there are deadlines to be kept in the future, or in the back of your mind, you've got you've got an hour to do this, and then you have to go somewhere else. So there are thoughts of the past and future arising and passing away in the present mind when it's necessary, and that they don't disturb that present awareness. But it's not seeking to escape from the present into the past, into the future. Now, taking that on as a stance, as a challenge in your life, it's a revolutionary movement. It can completely transform your whole experience, even if at least from an external point of view, there might be a lot which is rather unsatisfactory. It might be very busy, very noisy, unsympathetic people, difficulties in relationships around. But you start to develop this inner core and something that you can turn to, and it's that feeling that wherever you go, it's like you're carrying your house around on your back like a tortoise, or somewhere that you can just you can retreat to. You have a few minutes free, and you can come back to the present moment using as a vehicle your breathing. Your breath is always in the present moment. It's always there. It's always something that you can turn to. So once you take this on and be really interested in this, in finding ways of being more present, being more alive to experience, then you find you're learning all the time, because there are things occurring. The impact of forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and so on, impinging upon the senses. And also there are moods, there are feelings, thoughts, emotions arising and passing away. And you start to notice that the calmer and clearer your mind is, the more peaceful you are, the less that the thought of I, me, mine appears. So, you see, it's not a matter of saying the ego is bad. I shouldn't have an ego. I shouldn't be so selfish and self-centered, and I shouldn't keep, thinking of me and mine all the time. But there is this recognition that the sense of me and mine, that very strong, very painful, sensitive I, me all the time, is not a fixed thing. It's not a fixed part of your experience, but the intensity of it and the kind of the realness of it, the substantiality that it seems to possess, is very much conditioned by your state of mind. And that is a really important insight, to see something that you thought was kind of the real, is the core of your experience, is that which is standing behind, and the agent, the one who acts and is acted upon, is in fact a function of mental states and the presence or the lack of calmness and clarity in your mind. If you lack that kind of calmness, then the habitual reaction of the mind to experience is either to grasp onto or push away. And that's so deeply ingrained in our mind that it takes a lot of training and internal development to undermine or to weaken that. And so through the practice of mindfulness, you start to achieve this more and more. For instance, you choose an object, let's say the breath, and you let go of everything except the breath. Now that's an important attitude to take on right at the start. Not saying concentrate on the breath, you see. That produces a certain kind of concentrate, kind of heavy, tough, and doesn't sound very appealing, perhaps, immediately. But if you say just let go of all your preoccupations and attachments except for the breath, then that's kind of much more relaxed, isn't it? Same thing, but your attitude and the way that you articulate things to yourself has a major effect on how exactly you conduct yourself in that manner. So finding skillful means and skillful language, skillful vocabulary to talk to yourself is part of the skill or the art of the spiritual practitioner. So we let go of everything except for the breath, and try to produce and sustain this very positive feeling towards the breath. You really are confident that development of mindfulness will have good results in your life, and you're willing to make certain sacrifices for it, and you have that kind of commitment to it, interest in it. So it's not so much concentration as developing this sense of almost love for the breath, to the sense that just as you don't have to force yourself to be with someone you love, if you can develop that very same unrestricted positive emotion towards your meditation object, then you'll find meditation becomes quite easy, or much easier at least. And then, but even so, after some time, the mindfulness wavers a little bit, weakens a little bit. Other thoughts, emotions start to pop up or try to take over the mind, and then recognizing them simply as a thought of the past, of the future, simply that, and letting that go, and re-establishing one's commitment to the breath. One's developing a new skill, a new attitude to mental phenomena. Once you have one thing as your focus, then everything else becomes an interruption, and something which arises, encourages us, tries to tempt us to take it seriously. But when we refuse to do that, it sort of curls up or just disappears. And so after a while, this ability to maintain stability in the present moment, and not to rush off and grasp onto something which gives us a nice pleasant rush or feeling, and not something that we need to have to push away or protect ourselves if it gives rise to an unpleasant feeling, then we're starting to learn this, what equanimity means. Equanimity means this solidity, groundedness, which is not indifference and turning our back on something, and so you could have, it's all right, it's okay, because you're not really looking, not really opening your eyes to it, but you see it very clearly. And even though there is a sense of a pull or a push, you don't feel compelled to follow that anymore. Now that is one of the most important skills that we develop from the initial practice of meditation, being able to hold firm, but not through forcing or repressing, but simply seeing things for what they are, and seeing things just as paper tigers, nothing that really is so frightening or is so desirable. It's just what it is. It's just stuff. It's just mental stuff, just that arises and passes away. And then the feeling of freedom. You don't have to get so upset about things. You don't have to get so completely overwhelmed by things that there's nothing that has the intrinsic power to overwhelm us or to completely capsize us. There are things which will encourage us to feel overwhelmed, but there has to be a certain response or reaction from us. It's a joint production, in other words, and with just one side active and the inner side with a certain amount of stillness, then we begin to understand what it is not to be just the prey of every impression, every stimulus that comes our way. So we start to have this sense of inner refuge, and as we have this sense of inner refuge, the ability to be present even to things which would normally cause very strong feeling, emotion, then we begin to become more aware of the complex of causes and conditions which underlie things. And this is where the wisdom really starts to arise, when we see how things affect each other, the relationship between the body and the mind. For instance, we begin to see, let's start off very, very simple things which we probably would think quite obvious, but how often we overlook the fact that being at work all day, tired, weary, get back home, and how much more difficult it is to be patient with your spouse or your children than it is on a day when you're very relaxed, you haven't been to work or something. So the physical state of the mind, just the sense of weariness, affects how you communicate, whether you're willing to communicate, your patience, your willingness to be with the unpleasant. And this, this same pattern appears in many variations. It's as if maybe I can make a comparison. I lived for many years in Ubon, where the soil is extremely poor. It just looks like sand, basically, and it's very difficult to grow anything in that soil. Whereas here in Bakchong, the earth is extremely fertile, and almost anything will grow. So you have infertile soil where only a very few things will grow, and sometimes weeds will grow much more easily than crops that you could make use of. And very fertile soil in which you have a much wider range of things that will grow. And the comparison I'd like to make is with the mind. With the mind, which is untrained mind, it's like very poor soil. And there are only certain things which will grow in that mind and which will naturally flourish in that mind. Whereas a mind which has been trained is like the very good soil, and all kinds of things which will grow very well. So if you have an untrained mind, very little mindfulness, very little patience, very little sense of contentment, inner peace, then the kinds of thoughts and the kinds of emotions which will take root very easily in that mind tend to be quite coarse and dark thoughts and depressing thoughts. Whereas when the mind has that inner peace and inner happiness, then all kinds of good thoughts will arise. And if you're feeling good and happy, how easy it is to perform an act of kindness for someone else. And I'm sure you've noticed, if you're feeling really grumpy and miserable, you don't much feel like doing anything very good for anybody else. So the kinds of thoughts and the intentions and the emotions of the grumpy mind and those that appear in the joyous mind are very different. So this idea of state-specific emotions and thoughts is, again, I would say, a very important principle. So as you develop mindfulness, it's not just that you become more peaceful, and let's say you become more present, you become happier, but that happiness is the soil in which all kinds of very positive, altruistic thoughts just naturally arise, because they're the things that grow in a peaceful mind. So sometimes people have this idea it's a very individualistic, kind of selfish pursuit. You're meditating, that's all right for you, but what about everybody else? In fact, I think anyone who devotes themselves to spiritual training and meditation, for instance, will notice that there's thoughts of helping others and removing, reducing dukkha, unhappiness, suffering, wherever it arises, as best as one can given one's particular situation and gifts and abilities and so on, just arises more and more and more until it's not a big thing, it's just kind of normal and natural, and that's sort of the incredible generosity that you see as a feature of very spiritually advanced people. Indeed, the two qualities that of all the virtues of the Lord Buddha, the two which were singled out in the scriptures are wisdom and compassion, and they're often compared to the two wings of a bird. doesn't mean to say that they're inseparable, and that one is, to some degree, a test, a measure of the other. So if you want to see if someone's really wise, you see how compassionate they are. And if you want to know if someone's really compassionate, you see how wise they are. As to say, if you're really wise, which means you understand the way in which suffering arises, the way in which suffering is abandoned, and the way in which the vast majority of human beings suffer so unnecessarily, simply through a lack of clear understanding, not because of the way things are, the way the natural world is. There's so much suffering which is self-created, and the more that you've seen that in yourself, how you create suffering for yourself, how you can cease to create suffering for yourself, the clearer that becomes, then the more intolerable the suffering of others becomes to you. Now, with great compassion, then there is the intention, the emotion which provides the kind of the power to develop skillful means. You're just compassionate. You want to help other people to be free from suffering, but you don't have any idea about how to go about it. You don't have any understanding of people who have different personalities from different cultures. You don't have different ways of articulating, explaining things. You don't have social skills. You're not going to get very far. You're going to get very frustrated. And so the truly compassionate person is one that's constantly applying himself and trying to find ways of reducing suffering, skillful means, practical means of doing and speaking and communicating, which will effect that. So this is, I think, again, a good measure and something to bear in mind. At the beginning of the talk, I said that liberation is the sort of the keystone or the flavour of the teachings. So one should always, is this sense of more and more liberation? Are we letting go of more and more attachments, both to things external to ourselves and also most particularly internal attachments to ideas of who we are and to desires and so on. But over and apart from that, again, there's this growing sense of wisdom and recognition of the causal nature of things. And is there more and more compassion and devotion to reduction of suffering wherever it might appear, not just within oneself, but within the circle of people which one has some influence, or in the society at large. But say the crux of this wisdom is again seeing things in terms of causes and conditions. Give a very simple example. Someone makes a cup of instant coffee. You've got a number of ingredients. You've got coffee powder. You've got water. You've got say milk and sugar. Let's say, and someone gives you this cup of coffee. Now you have this basic wisdom or knowledge of the ingredients of that cup of coffee. So if you were to drink the coffee and it's bitter, then your wisdom would tell you that it's missing one of the ingredients, which is sugar. So you'd increase the amount of sugar. It's too strong, you might water it down a bit. Or you might add some milk, for instance. So you're aware of the nature of that coffee as a conditioned phenomena produced by the mixing of these four different quantities. But then there are certain things that you can change. You can make it sweeter, you can water it down, you could add more coffee and make it stronger. But if it was Nescafe, and you thought, well, it's all right, but I wish it was ground coffee. As you can't change the taste of Nescafe to make it like the taste of ground coffee, so there are certain limitations on what you can do with that cup of coffee. So applying this within, there are complex phenomena, often more than 4 different ingredients. So, but when the mind is calm, and when you develop this ability, you're able to see the different strands and the different things that support this particular condition, this particular problem, and you're able to take them apart, and you start to ask yourself, well, of the various ingredients of this situation, of this problem, which ones can I do something about? Which ones do I just have to put up with? Which ones should I apply myself to first? Which ones after? Is my mind in the state in which it could perform those tasks or not? So this is the kind of analysis that becomes possible when the mind has been disciplined and trained, and can start to look at things in a very refined and profound kind of way, and what things just to let go, what things that you just have to be patient and bear with, what things that you need to do something about, and quickly. It's as we know, Buddha says everything is impermanent, but in the very last words of the Buddha before he passed away, he said, all things are impermanent, therefore you should strive on with great heedfulness, diligence. And this is an important point which is often overlooked. The Buddha is saying is, because everything is impermanent, therefore you should put forth effort. Whereas often, in Thailand, often you say, well, because everything is impermanent, just wait, it'll change by itself, But don't worry about it. And that's not at all what the Buddha said. Yeah, it probably will change by itself, but it might get worse. It's not necessarily going to get better. So, things aren't as bad as you think. They're much, much worse. So, so the idea is, because things are changing, because everything's in a state of flux, you can't take anything for granted. Nothing at all. There's nothing there that's fixed. So you see, you look at all the negative qualities you have, all the defilements and the weaknesses and the problems you have. There's nothing there which is fixed, immutable, which is going to be there forever. There's something that you can do about it. So that gives you a sense of hope and inspiration. But on the other side, you look at all the good things, and maybe for a lot of us, looking at the good things is more difficult than looking at the hard things, but there are a lot of good things. But similarly, they're unstable, and they're in a state of flux. And if you're not skillful in knowing how to look after them, and how to nurture them, then those good qualities can very, very easily, given adverse conditions, disappear altogether. And that's a devastating thing to happen when you've taken certain things within yourself, certain things you've developed within yourself that you're very proud of, and you don't take care of them, you don't know how to take care of them, and just suddenly you turn around one day and where did that go? So this is the Buddha's teaching. He says this is the Viryavada teaching. So it's a technical term, means that comparing with various religious systems, one of the features of the Buddhist religious system is a system of effort. It's a religion of effort. Some religions say, well, everything is predestined already. Whatever you do, it doesn't make any difference ultimately. It's all predestined. But the Buddha says it's not. There's something you can do about it. There's something you should do about it. And in fact, making that effort to do something about it is what gives your life real value and true happiness. So that is probably all I'd like to say for the first part of this afternoon. And now we have a choice now. We can either have a meditation session, or if those of you sitting on the floor would like 5 minutes just to stretch your legs first. Yes? Okay. Just a short break then for 5 minutes, and then we'll have a